Hi everyone, it's a new month and Spellbinder's monthly clubs have been released for September. I'm featuring the wax seal of the month, a gorgeous seal called Fall Meadow. Wax seals are more than just for envelopes. I love the beautiful focal point they can add to a card. The kit is made up of the seal, the wooden handle, and an accompanying bag of wax beads. Fall Meadow is a gorgeous design and really could be used year-round. It is really pretty. The wax beads come in a resealable bag. The antique gold wax beads are perfect for fall cards. From Spellbinder's Wax Seal Starter Kit, I'll be working with the silicone mat, the wax warmer, and the warming spoon. I'm just lighting my tea light candle, and as you can see, it has been used. If it was new, I would actually trim the wick down. The last thing we want is soot forming on the bottom of the spoon. If it gets on anything with any porosity, it is extremely difficult to get off. I've melted 6 beads in my warming spoon. I have a little bit more than what I need, but I'd rather have more than not enough. The wax beads melt surprisingly quickly under that little tea light candle. But to help it along, I have some skewers that I've cut up and I just give it a stir now and again. The wax is ready when it's a nice liquid consistency. You don't want it too hot, otherwise bubbles will form. The wax is poured onto the silicone mat in a circular motion. The wax will pool. I want it to be a little bit smaller than a Canadian or American quarter. Sorry, I couldn't think of any other reference. The seal is centered over the pool of wax, and it is just set down, not pushed down. And while the wax is setting up, and it doesn't take long, I add a couple of more wax beads to the wax in my melting spoon so I can make a second seal. And right on the bottom of the side of the seal, I give it a little nudge with my fingernail just to make sure that it is set. Such a beautiful design. And again, I give the wax a stir with my chopped up wooden skewer. It is a liquid consistency. I'll pour it onto the silicone mat. And the wax seal is centered over the wax pool and set down. If there had been enough wax left in the spoon, I would have poured it onto the mat, let it harden, and add it to my stash. While my wax seal is setting up, I take a paper towel and give the spoon a good wipe to clean it. Fair warning, making wax seals can be pretty addictive. Now for the card. I'm going to start off by doing some ink blending on white cardstock with Distress Oxide inks, candied apple, carved pumpkin, and mustard seed. This will be used to die cut some pretty fall leaves, so the ink is applied randomly. I want some shiny gold spatter. I want it to be fine, so I'm going to use embossing powder. Take just a pinch between my thumb and finger, rub them together as I sprinkle it all over the panel. The tool has come up to full temperature. I don't want the embossing powder to blow off, so I heat it underneath the panel just until that embossing powder begins to melt. Then I can go ahead and apply the heat to the top of the panel to finish the melt. I've prepared 2 panels and I'm going to cut 6 leafy branches. This die is included in the Enchanted Stitched Mushrooms set, the stitching die of the month for September. The central stem is quite fine, so I release it from the bottom and then peel it upwards to make sure I don't tear it. 2 dies from the Essential Stylish Ovals nesting die set are taped together so that I can create a gold frame. The smaller of the 2 ovals is then used to cut brown cardstock, which measures 4 1/4 inches by 5 1/2 inches, A2 sized. I generally do not use Tombow glue, but I always use it for this application. When applying adhesive to fine die cuts or to foil, as in this case, and I don't want the glue to smudge on the foil, I apply this glue, set it aside to dry, until it is in its tacky state. While it is drying, I'm going to emboss some brown cardstock with argyle socks and then trim it down to A2 size. Now I'll take some black sheet foam that is oversized and cut it with the same oval die that was used for the card front. The foam will stretch a little bit as it goes through the die cutter, and being oversized just makes it a little bit easier to trim off afterwards. The card front is adhered to the foam, making sure that the oval die cuts line up. I can position the gold frame. The Tombow glue, which is dry and tacky, is also repositionable, so this makes it very easy to get it into position. And then I'm going to set it aside so that the adhesive between the cardstock and the foam is completely dry before I trim it down. And while it is drying, I'm going to use a fine nibbed gold marker to highlight the high areas on my wax seals. I hold the marker so that it is almost parallel with my work surface, not quite, and then drag the side of the nib across the surface. And if you take your eyes over to the leaves, you can see the glint of that pretty embossing powder spatter. Now my foam back panels are dry, I'm going to use large shears to trim off the excess foam. To ensure a nice straight cut that is not jagged, I push the blade right up against the edge of the cardstock, angle my scissors slightly towards the inside of the panel, and cut. It is then adhered to the embossed panel, which is warped. So after I adhere it, I'm going to set it aside to dry under some weight to flatten it out. The wax seal is going to tie the leafy bouquet together, so I need a little bit of bare stem and trim off the bottom 3 leaves. I could have laid out this leafy bouquet and then poured the wax seal directly on the card front, but I wasn't brave enough to try it, but I will at some point. So instead, I'll resort to my liquid adhesive, just placing a dot on the middle of the bare portion of the stem and overlapping the 2 other stems of leaves. A circle of the wax seal adhesive has been placed on the back of the seal, and I'll just lay that down on my leafy bouquet. The sentiment is also from the Enchanted Stitched Mushroom die set. There was enough room on the ink blended panel that was used to cut the leaves to also cut the sentiment. And to make sure there's not too much adhesive, I dab it off on my hand before I place it on the lower portion of the oval die cut opening. The leafy bouquet is going to be attached with foam squares. I use larger ones on the back of the seal and then small ones on the back of the leaves. The seal is centered in the lower portion of the oval, and then I just let the leaves fall where they may. If I needed to reposition any of the leaves, the foam is pretty forgiving, and I wanted to fill out the top portion of my bouquet, and so I add in one of the leaves that had been trimmed off of the stems. This pair of cards is finished off with some pretty gold foil half pearls. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you haven't tried making a wax seal, you must. It is really a lot of fun. Such a beautiful focal point for a card. And Spellbinder's Wax Seal of the Month Fall Meadow is absolutely gorgeous. Thank you for joining me, and as always, I appreciate your visit.